the organizing committee. All right, perfect. Without further ado, we'll welcome the Prime Minister. You're here.
Hello, sorry, can I have like 30 seconds to just get a bit of water? Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, hello, am I audible? Sorry for that.
Loud and clear.
Okay, thank you, for the confirmation. You did pronounce she, her. For POI, you can just directly unmute yourself. I think raise hand is also a viable option if you want. But chat box, I can't really see it at the same time. So yeah, just directly unmute yourself. I prioritize from CO. But if OO wants to, it's okay. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. First, before starting, a few setups on how the world currently looks like, of how the Catholic Church works, and how it inherently is something that is very important for them to help its underprivileged members, right? Firstly, on the church's mission, right? The Catholic Church's mission is rooted in teachings of Jesus Christ, which emphasize the care of the poor and a lot of vulnerable and helping a lot of people, right? Which means the theological burden that they indeed have is to uphold the values that Jesus Christ also upholded in his life, right? Like how he distributed, for example, fish and bread to 5,000 people that are hungry and need food, which means that theological burden will also be needed to be fulfilled by the church in itself. And the second setup is on the reality of the poverty among church members, right? Many Catholic Church members are still struggling with poverty. They face a lot of challenges like unemployment or even being homeless or even being hungry at the same time. Despite all of these hardships that they currently have, they still remain committed to going to their church, attending masses, for example, contributing however they can towards the church's purpose as well. It is something that is inherent within any type of church and community in itself, which means it is something that we need to help. But then I will move on to my arguments. Four things under my speech. Firstly, on why we should help the underprivileged member. Because firstly, Catholic churches makes money from donations. The Catholic Church relies on donations from its members, right? They trust the church to use that money to make a real difference, to help people, to fulfill the theological needs that this church actually provides to them, right? This gives the church the responsibility to spend those funds in ways that reflects its actual core values and mission towards helping people, right? Because the purpose of Catholic Church is to preach God's will and help the people. Things like providing food, shelter, and job opportunities to these underprivileged members directly aligns with the church moral mission as well. What is unique within these communities that they are very close in proximity, right? Which means by doing this, the church lives up to its core values and builds a much stronger and more faithful community towards themselves as well, right? Because funding the underprivileged is the best way to give back to the people. How are we going to do that? On three things. A, they're going to do it based on needs. People who are needed the most at the time of the helping, for example, and B, on the most vulnerable, with the ones that doesn't have any access to jobs, lack of support, and any alternatives, which means they need the church to actually help them, right? And then C, this is a good use of donation money, right? Which means you're uplifting the poor, just like what uplifting the poor, just like what Jesus did, feeding the poor, healing the sick, etc. It is something that fulfills all of the missions that the church inherently wants. But then, secondly, on supporting livelihood, you aid the poor with food, providing shelter, job opportunities, etc. Which means, because a lot of people that are underprivileged because of externalities, things like birth lottery, luck, capitalism, or systemic problems within the state. There's no other feasible way for them to escape this poverty if they're not supported by their own church that is the most proximate to them. The proximity is important because things like the government and the other institutions like NGOs, etc., fails to help these people. But the church is uniquely positioned to step in because it's already close to the community and has resources to make those differences in people's lives that are struggling in the most immediate way possible, right? Because these people deserve to gain attention and help. They're born underprivileged, but they still worship God and chose to be part of the Catholic Church in itself. They still go to church, they still did community services, etc., which means their devotion is also something that needs to be recognized and needs to gain attention from and needs help from the church in itself to actually show that they care towards the people that are devoted to the God, that are devoted within their church, for example, right? But then thirdly, I'm going to explain on why gaining support for livelihood strengthens these people's productivity. These people who are underprivileged strengthens their productivity to give back towards the community inside the church or the community in general as well, right? Because A, on long-term projections, it improves the standards of their living, right? People will have more capacity to donate in the future, for example. But improving people's livelihood, for example, through food, shelter, or even supporting them to have jobs, for example, the church helps them become more productive and be more capable in the long run. This leads then to better living standards that they would have in the future, and many of these people will then eventually have the ability to give back, whether through donations or by helping others or by helping more within the church, etc. These people will and but B, these people are still devoted to the church. It feels like they got salvation and help from God. When people feel cared for by the church, they see it as a source of salvation and hope. Their faith and devotion towards the church will also be much deeper under our side because they can see that the church is someone that is helping them, right? But before that, I'll take CO. One, two.
Do you think the people who are going to be
I'm sorry, I think it's lagging here.
helped are majority Catholics only?
I'll just continue because I cannot hear it. Sorry.
Uh, uh,
Even if people can't give back, simply helping them live better lives still fulfills the church's purpose of spreading love and compassion and actually helping people that are actually in need. That alone is something that's inherently a net benefit, and then alone is a victory for us, right? But then I'm going to explain to you the comparative with building new churches is something that's inherently bad, right? Because firstly, there's no tangible help for the people. The benefits of a new church can only be felt after a church is built and if the money is given back towards the people. It is time consuming and there's no certainty of that happening as well, which means constructing new churches is expensive and takes time, while helping people provides those immediate benefits for these people that inherently is struggling, that inherently needs this immediate support, right? Because hunger does cannot wait for another 5 to 10 years, right? It's something that needs to be helped right now. What is the likelihood of it being bad, right? A, because it's costly to build new churches when those money could have been used for the people. A new church might not even be necessary because a lot of these areas have places of worship, but these people attending them are struggling to survive as well. But B, the quote like saying that maybe the opposite, say more churches means more donation, defies the teachings of the religion to help the poor because your goal is not to get more donation, but it's to help people and spread those theological burdens that you have, right? And C, and the allocation of resources, these emphasizes on welfare expansion and infrastructure, vanity over helping the poor, right? This creates a perception that the church overlooks people suffering. This means there's less trust towards the Catholic Church as well in the future. Proud to propose.
Thank you, PM, for that speech. Next, we'll have the leader of here.
Okay, am I audible?
Loud and clear.
Okay, if you want to POI, just chat. I can see the chat. Just say your team name, POI, OG, POI, CG. I'll try to take one POI. One sec. Mm, Right. Let me just. Okay. I will start in 3, 2, one. I hope KGI is not tired hearing it, but the problem of opening government case is in exclusivity, right? They explain that the main goal of their debate is to be able to extend Jesus' principle in order for them, for churches, to be able to help the congregation, especially the underprivileged one. I think they need to explain to what was the issue with the current role of churches in particular, because I don't think that the debate operate into churches not helping people all together. In our side of the house, the expansion and the idea of building and maintaining churches in rural area, that does not entirely means that there is no allocation for or funding that are allocated to what the people, especially in the way that it is donating the money to what the people that are in needs. I'm going to explain that later. But the most important aspect when we are talking about religion, when we talk about Catholic churches, is to understand the most important outward principle and goal and motivation of the role, especially because the debate want to evaluate that, which is to foster the practice of the religion. I think that if you notice the argumentation, the extension of impact in opening government, want to go there as well. They want to talk about on how people can be more religious. So fostering the practice of religion, also in line with the idea of ensuring the word of God that can still be alive, and this requires the reachability of the religion to be sustainable and to exist within the area where it does not exist prior to that, which is the underprivileged area. Because understand too that in the different contexts with underprivileged places with non-underprivileged places is the presence of the churches that existing within that area, right? In places where it is not underprivileged, churches already exist there because donation and also the followers that are not underprivileged could be able to build it. They don't even need to wait for Catholic or Vatican to be able to demand for the building of that particular churches, but the extension of need of this particular area are something that is not fulfilled through any other means. I'm going to engage on the altruistic argumentation from government. The basic goal that government want is for religion to be the most altruistic form it could be. Allocation of resources for social need does not guarantee the prosperity of the religion or the people that are following that religion. Why is that so? Two things. Number one, the idea of improving the livelihood of the people does not necessarily resolve the idea of systemic poverty, because the reason being as those areas being under impoverished and like, let's say, enabled to be able to get back on their feet are not because they are not being helped by their local churches, but it's because there's a problem in the way that the government allocate and distribute the idea of systematic help to the people that are living in that particular state. But why was this identification important? If you want to be able to maximize the benefit that you could be able to get through what the existence of that particular churches, I think the role of the religion and the stance of churches need to be differentiated with the stance and the position of state or any other organization. When it is faced with poverty, the most important aspect that religion and also churches could be able to do is to be able to sustain and to be able to help and reach to a certain type of ability that they can to ensure that the people can get certain amount of supply. And within it, this is not exclusive from the side of government to some certain extent, and this does not require us to completely prioritize our entire budget there. But let's understand what building and maintaining churches would look like, just to be able to showcase you why it's fair for us to create this setup. Two things. One, providing humanitarian grants that also look like into providing scholarship to ensure that there are a lot of people out of the particular diversified region that could be able to bring the idea of that particular religion out there in the idea or infiltrating education, or providing regular donation as well. If not directly, let's give them that. Let's say that we do not give our, let's say, donation directly. We think that church can exist by inviting and providing the network that the church has, which through Catholic NGO or through richer donor to the area. These are not something they can just dismiss by saying that this will not likely to happen or this is backlashing to the value of the religion, because the exact role of religion is to be able able to be there to connect the community to what other congregation among each other, which by the way are something that is very likely to exist because there are a lot of philanthropists and there's a lot of NGO that exist on the basis of Catholicism that want to provide that particular help. To do this, churches need to exist as a platform of connector. They need to access in the area where it need help, and that's why you need to build that particular churches to begin with. But the role of improving quality are inexclusive as well, because state and non-religious organization exist. They need to explain to what situation that compel churches, Catholic churches to be specific, to be able to, get over 100 degree of their role and to suddenly change the purpose and the role that they have in current status quo, how bad the situation is. But I'd like to clarify as well, why underprivileged community will not leave their religion suddenly, right? 4 points under this. One, Catholicism access in their life, not as an aspect to provide worldly need. Because life is hard, underprivileged tend to focus on providing other more non-discriminatory aspect of their life to get salvation. Religious follower, no matter how poor they are, still submit to religion because of the spiritual need, showcased by, let's say, the excesses of persembahan that is given by underprivileged community, no matter how hard their life is, to spare part of them for God. That is a much more important principle that you can fulfill as an underprivileged community. But second, people don't need money to be connected to their God. This is a very wrong argumentation, because any argument about you need some level of comfortable life to be loyal to religion is untrue, because sometimes the more suffering you are, the more connected you are to God. This is not something that is directly correlated. I know that there's some part that might be dysfunctional when you could not be able to, have some amount of money, but the practice of a good religion never compel you to have money to begin with to be able to connect to your God. But third, if the issue of donation and where it is allocated stop you from submitting to the religion, we don't think it is right for the church to pander to human needs. It is not the followers that need to be appeased by religion, it is the God. Through the prospering of the bigger goal and purpose of religion, which is ensuring the practice of religion that can be as reachable as possible. But lastly, any conversion created with the level of worldly as possible by giving people money, people get into Catholicism because they feel like Catholic can provide them the ability to be able to sustain their life, are not principally correct. Because Catholicism exists not as a platform for you to be able to submit what the world need and to be able to dissociate from that, to be able to separate from that. So they might say intention can change over time, but no, intention matter. It shifts the intention. It deconstructs people believe to be on the basis of materialistic and not godly needs, and we don't want that. Which is why the fostering practice of religion matter and why it's exclusive, because churches again access as a connector. Underprivileged area are white and very disconnected. They are more likely to not be well networked, so we agree on that part. But the role of churches then is to not to extend to what the government through social program, but to provide platform and place for safeties, places for them to be in good, big, comfortable churches, places to many pastor or many people that can work and to get the benefit of being able to work under churches to be able to spread the word of God. So if the poor need job, church can employ them in our side. But what you sacrifice now is the presence of the church as part of the religion, event that can enrich the community sense of being, big masses to accommodate this particular thing. This significantly reduces sense of communality, sense of spirituality, which is the most important aspect of the religion to begin with, more than proud to oppose in this debate.
Thank you all for that speech. Next, we'll have the Deputy Prime Minister here.
Am I audible?
Loud and clear.
Okay, thank you, Pat. Pio, I just directly unmute yourself. We agree in opening opposition that the Catholic Church will still practice religion and talk about Jesus. But unfortunately, that doesn't clash with the entire nuance my PM talks about. The Catholic Church promised to improve the people's life. But if you're unable to even help the people within your own proximity, stop preaching that you will expand the existence and to expand the entire presence of Catholic Church and Dear South the House. You do not help the people in rural areas or even maximize the benefits of more donation and helping more of those people on the ground. Under the logic that there is absolutely no churches in some rural areas, for instance, like what opening opposition wants to talk about, most likely the most moderate scenario is to say that the people in those particular area is also not extremely religious, exactly because you're not exposed to the entire idea of Catholicism as well. This negates all the benefit under opening opposition about sustainability because they are not your members. It is very difficult for you to build the entire church under Dear South the House, to establish entire teaching, to indoctrinate every single people in those rural area for you to actually get the benefits of expansion of religion under their side of the house anyway. But secondly, then, I think it's also very uncertain the opening opposition on how sustainability exists under their case. Because if your existing member is not even feeling contentment or feeling salvation that you can get from God, expansion wouldn't even work because there's active condemnation that comes from how the church fails to even uplift their most vulnerable members, to actually uplift the people who are already existing inside all of these Catholic churches, who already devoted their entire life to read about their Bible, to actually learn about their religion and so on. Most likely, it's even harder for them to actually create those presence that opening opposition wants, exactly because you do not help even the people who are most vulnerable and who are supposed to be focused on under the years of the house. But two things then under our speech. Firstly, on what does the allocation look like for building new churches? Secondly, later on the outcome of it. Firstly, then, on how does the allocation look like for building new churches? This already tackles opening opposition's house stance that talks about how there's still money for the underprivileged society. I think firstly, allocation of capital has to be large in quantity because building new churches requires plenty of resources. It starts with things like land acquisition, material acquisition, constructing the actual church, or even the maintenance purposes that requires a huge number of donation money, despite the different sources of income we have in both of the house. I think even if you want to argue that there's going to be more expansion in a lot of these rural areas, most likely the process of inspection and construction of the entire Catholic Church is something that's not immediate. It requires a lot of money, and the entire process is going to be something that is very time consuming as well. Therefore, even if the entire idea under opening opposition is the idea of expanding Catholicism or having more money in their side of the house, it is not going to be an immediate and tangible benefit under their side. This does not clash with the entire problem that my PM has talked to you about in this debate, right? Because insofar, it is very difficult for these people to actually sustain on the ground because you have a lot of issues, such as the corrupted government, for instance. You don't have other alternatives for you to gain jobs or for you to gain money for you to actually survive. It is way more urgent for you to actually talk about these people. And the Catholic Church, if you talk about wanting to help your people, wanting to help the followers, it's best that you allocate your entire funding towards helping survivability and helping the livelihood of your most vulnerable members. But secondly, then, most likely the building of new churches becomes progressively more expensive as well in the long term on the peer side due to the politicization of Catholicism. What does this mean? This means that Catholicism has already been a prominent voter base for politicians to spread their campaign to gain personal electoral popularity. Most likely because the construction is politically incentivized, there are active efforts for politicians to influence church higher-ups to not build these new churches only in rural areas. Most likely they would incentivize them to build a lot of new churches only in central urban areas in which it is closer to city for politics to actually run, for campaigns to actually be established in the years of the house. This is bad then, because most likely in this context, the land chosen for building these new churches is very expensive and requires even more money under their end, which would have otherwise been used for other more important causes, such as feeding the poor, for instance, providing education or healthcare for its most underprivileged members. But thirdly, even if we want to engage in open opposition context, I think the establishment of new churches only exists in the long term as well, in which you assume there's already a huge allocation of funding and time to build the physical infrastructure. Even if open opposition wants to argue that building new churches open up more chances to gain more donation, for instance, that only happens and only applies in long term, but it's still bad because the translated benefit are highly uncertain. This is true then because of a few reasons. That A, it defies the entire teaching of religion to help the poor. This article puts open opposition's context about materialistic focus on religion, because this is about survivability, not about hedonism. Therefore, that is not the context of this debate. This is individual debate winning because if the Catholic Church survives on the principle of prioritizing your most vulnerable member, you save them under OG by supporting their livelihoods and ensuring that your members of the church are well accommodated. But secondly, then, it creates an emphasis on wealth for expansion and only on infrastructure vanity over helping the poor. You use wealth for the sake of establishing your personal legitimacy as a religious leader, as opposed to aiding your members who could have survived under arms of the house, right? Most likely, due to the lack of transparency of the allocation, is most likely going to be disproportionate because having a lot more of your grand churches in every single city, for example, or in every single area, makes you look more credible and more powerful as a religious leader as well. But thirdly, then, even if you get the benefits of more donors and the opening opposition, or possibly CO as well, the benefit becomes less significant because oftentimes livelihood-related issues is something that is highly time-sensitive. If you do not receive immediate aid, you lose the prime time to get medical assistance. If you do not receive money now, you lose access to basic necessities such as food or humanitarian products to survive just another day for the people on the ground. You're actively turning a blind eye to your church members who are suffering and who depends on their life to actually live the entire life. If there are chances in which you could have helped them, but you chose not to, is exactly when the Catholic Church is extremely immoral and does not fulfill the entire purpose of helping. people. What is the weighing then on this first point? I think your weight is based on the idea of urgency, because the money allocated on OG is directed to the most vulnerable actors that depend their entire life on it, which otherwise there are no other alternatives to get the support, because people do not actively donate to individual other than to a lot of these Catholic churches. Governmental structure is something that's already extremely corrupted to the extent of abandoning a lot of these marginalized individuals who are not given any opportunity. Insofar as the Catholic Church has a moral obligation to follow Jesus' teaching, you better serve it on the arts of the house. The second, more on the outcome of it, right? When you prioritize churches, it creates a perception that the church overlooks the people's grievances. You promise a good life for the religious devotees, but you actually chose to give up on them for the sake of visible infrastructure. This is bad because you get less trust towards the Catholic Church when the messages you provide and the actions you do not align at all. Insofar as you lose trust, you get less and less member to support the survivability of the institution, therefore directly flipping the entire case of opening opposition. Their point about suffering builds more connection to God really only exists in debate, because when you pray to God every single day but you're not seeing any improvement in your life, it's very difficult for you to find spiritual salvation when you're triggered by your survival instinct, when you hate religion because it harms your entire family and your church decides to abandon you. Comparatively on our side, my PM has already made it very clear that the theological purpose is to help these people. You give them even more money for them to actually survive, to make sure that their lives are well accommodated too. This is important because this argument runs regardless of our urgency about the people on the ground. If we do not have members, it really doesn't matter how many grand churches or how many expansion you have on the opposition bench, because attachment is no longer prominent, therefore legitimacy doesn't even exist on the House purpose.
Thank you, DPA, for that speech. Next, we'll have the Deputy Leader of Op. You're here.
Okay, for Poi to chat. I will see. I already put up my chat bar here. Wait, let me out my clock again. Okay. If I misrepresent what the Catholic Church want, I'm very sorry. But yeah, hopefully not it. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. First thing that I'm going to do is to re-emphasize and re-clarify what the Leader of Opposition has said, which is that the exclusivity of opening government's worldly benefit can already be catered through non-religious means. And I think within the context slide, it is already provided that the Catholic Church currently also have allocation of budget towards supporting its personnel, educating children, and also providing humanitarian grants. So I think that we cannot start on a negative status quo. We're starting in a neutral status quo. So the comparison is not that in their side they're going to improve and in our side they're going to be impoverished. The comparison is in their side, quality of life is probably going to be improved, but in our side, it is going to be at the federally secure and sustainable. Like they're not going to be dying, is what we can assure you. So the first framework that I would like to clarify and straighten out is we agree with opening government that a social body like the Catholic Church is supposed to maximize social contribution. Now, the problem is for OG, they see social contribution as welfare, like security, or even more than that, as prosperity, because they want people to improve their quality of life. What they are unable to see is that already posits that social order and spiritual sanctuary is an intangible form of social contribution. So I don't want to hear that just because, let's say that at the very worst case, we cannot give welfare to people, that we do not have social contribution as a social body, because spiritual sanctuary and social order is also still a form of social contribution. And that is the part that needs to be taken as a sacrifice by OG, because what they're lessening is the amount of churches, is the frequency of events that can be held in the churches and the community events that they can hold. So that's what they're going to lose, and they need to admit that part. So this is an exclusive feat that can only be done by a spiritual organization, while what OG wants, like my LO has said, can be done by any other worldly actors like government, NGO, philanthropists, activists. That's why all of these organizations, alongside the Catholic Church, exist hand in hand, and they're complementary to each other. They do not overrun what the rights and responsibility of each is supposed to do. Vatican already provide humanitarian aids, already provide grants, already provide scholarship. Even churches already have help educating children morally and ethically, even if we're not teaching the math, right? So what I would like to highlight is that all the bad things OG said about OO's church, lack of transparency, that will still exist in both sides because we're not changing the system of how our money is going to be disseminated and the report is going to be conducted, right? Both are going to be like in transparency. Time sensitivity, something that cannot be catered in both sides because we're still highly structural. You need time for the money to be able to be disseminated downwards and to be disseminated to a lot of people, just like how bantuan sosial or bansos in Indonesia also need that. The Catholic Church is as hierarchical and as structurized as government. There is no difference in both sides. But thirdly, if the construction of church is politically incentivized, then both sides are equally politically incentivized. What does that mean? One, that's not the debate actually. But secondly, why would politicians not want swing voters in less competitive area? Just like how politicians already do, serangan fajar and give money to impoverished people, they would do that through church if they can do that. Secondly as well, why would church let their member walk further to the city just to go to church and make a life hard for themselves when, like OG said, they are very devoted and they want to contribute to church? Why are we making it hard by not disseminating more church in their area, lessening one of their burden that is within our capacity, right? Because that's our capacity to build the church. If they would need bansos, the government is already catering that. Thirdly, if politician is that mean and government is that mean, doesn't that mean the motion stands for opposition even more, that we need to build churches ourselves because they're not going to make it easy for us to build church. They're going to make it easy for any other things, but not that specifically. So yeah, if that's the case, then activists, NGO, philanthropic capitalists will have to work as hard as church to do their part. And we're going to do our part, which is building churches. So the very, very last clarification. Our comparison is not that in their side there will be no church at all. It will be less amount of church and it will be less amount and frequency of event. So they need to take the sacrifice and they need to explain why it will still be fun in their side to not be able to cater to your impoverished member spiritually. If they talk about people who are skeptical about church because, oh, why is church not giving me worldly things? They're not the target of church in the first place because the moment that they get into church in their side and the church have like some financial difficulty or maybe the donation is not as much as previously and you cannot disseminate as much amount of money as previously, you are the one that is going to be expected by the people that you have helped, like, oh, why are you not giving? Why is it stopped? Why is it serut, for example? And I think that expectation will exist in your side because you have normalized the idea that worldly welfare need to be able to be felt, that God's blessing need to be able to be felt in order for you to have faith. But in our side, we never really smear the core of what faith means, that in your hardship, you still need to be able to find spiritual guidance. You need to still be able to find some meaning in your suffering, for example. That teaching and message is never skewed in our side, and that's why we don't think that in their world suddenly people help people like religion. That's not that easy, right? There needs to be also some sort of sustainability, which both sides also cannot ensure. That's why we need to lessen that kind of expectation and manage it to ensure that there will be no such high expectation. Before we continue, I'll give to CG.
Oh, do you think it is okay for you to disseminate churches in the form of proselytization?
Well, you are also disseminating churches in the form of, religion is in the form of proselytization, essentially by promising people like MLM and pyramid scheme that your life in the world will be fine for as long as you join Catholic Church. That is also predatory converting tactic. In our side, we don't even ask for you to give back. We just ask for you to believe in God, and that's that. So it's more predatory in government side. But anyway, my second argument, we believe that in the status quo, it's already catered through community. In the status quo, a lot of Catholic bodies like school, orphanage, etc., which operate as private bodies, by the way, is built by devout, privileged Catholic communities. It already exists. Our people right now, they're not selfish, egotistical, mega churches, people who live in the city that doesn't care about solidization or care about people who are poor because they live by the word of God. Love thy neighbors like thy love thyself. Be the extension of God's hands. Spread the blessing. They're already doing that by providing private bodies that is built by them, and they still take and they still give affirmative action within their bodies. But secondly, even more grassroots community child rearing, cross subsidy within your community. If your neighbor cannot give like persepuluhan, that will be fine. Maybe you will cover for them. If there's a sick member, elderly member, you will take care of them. Orang dalam or nepotism based on religion, you will get leniency and paying school fee if you are in a religious school and you're poor. Ease of getting employment for as long as you're honest, hardworking job in a Catholic person's firm, for example. So I think that even right now, our community is already fostering it grassrootsly, and I think that it's easing up the job of the Catholic Church as an organization to just focus on our job as an organization, which is to preach, which is to build community events, which is to build and maintain our churches. For all the other parts that are grassroots, our community is already doing it because we're doing such a good job in building the community. So if you believe that you need to improve the quality of life immensely, I think that status quo is already catering that. We're not using wealth to establish legitimacy. I think that Goff is the one that is doing that, and we're back to, oh, purple, sorry.
Thank you, PLO, for the speech. Next, we'll have the member of COP. You're here.
Am I audible, visible?
Loud and clear.
Okay. My POI preferences is to just unmute yourself. Pronouns use they, them, or she, her. Hang on, let me find my timer. Okay, I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. In the Catholic Church, in the Exodus book, it is highlighted option for the poor and the vulnerable. We agree that with OG that the church has a gospel factor in helping the poor, but CG today will let you know how the historical context and the unique characterization of the churches means that the church itself already has a principal duty to give back towards the underprivileged members. When you preach redemption, you preach eternal damnation. You as the Catholic Church should take responsibility, practice what you preach, and salvage whatever dignity you have left. First of all, on the principle of duty, right? I'm going to talk about 3 things in my speech. Firstly, on the principle of duty. Secondly, principle of reparation. Oh, sorry, no. Reparation first, duty, and then our model. Okay, on the principle of reparation, why principally the church has a moral obligation? First of all, the church has the power over the vulnerable. What OO doesn't understand is that the church has power over the vulnerable. Why is this? Because most of the vulnerable, because they are, constantly facing a lot of difficult things in life, they usually opt into this religion from the Catholic Church as a coping mechanism. This means that the church inexplicably has power over all these people, which means that because this Catholic Church takes away the agency of the people to be able to takes away some of the agency from these people, the church has a responsibility to kind of recover their agency and give back in this sort of sense. Secondly, the church historically has already marginalized the vulnerable in the past that still affects the present. When in the past, Catholic Church essentially turned going to heaven as a pay-to-win system. This is why we have to put the responsibility on the Catholic Church itself. Even if there are other bodies that are able to give back to the community, the Catholic Church is the only actor that uniquely has the principle and moral duty. This means that because the church historically already marginalized the poor by saying that they did not deserve salvation, that still affects nowadays when people have the kind of narrative that if you don't tithe enough, you are not good enough to go to heaven. Hang on. And this is why the church has to pay back. Thirdly, the church profits off of the large followings. There's tithes, commercial activity through museum tickets in the Vatican City, selling merch like historical antiques, like coins and publications. The church itself gets investment from banks like Chase and through the Holy See in the Vatican City. They have shares in very, very large corporations. If OO wants to kind of bring the argument that Catholic Church is not supposed to be an avenue of worldly endeavors, it has clearly failed in preaching that message. When you see that the Vatican City is rolling in gold, first, and then also, historically, the Catholic Church also is complicit in the history of colonization. The reason why colonization and proselytization happens and Christianity domination happens in the status quo is because the Catholic Church was the one who sponsored that kind of message in the first place. Because of the idea and the narrative of glory and especially gospel, they feel like they are justified to spread the gospel however they want, even though it's very, very aggressive. This is why we say that it's morally abhorrent for OO to even view these rural areas as a place that needs help. Therefore, the church is the one to solve it. We say that principally it is abhorrent historically. I'll take that PR.
Right, we don't oppose this because we have explained how the duty of preaching can be extended through community, but this argument is an argument of fixing mistake, not exclusive through the financial help that you want. Wouldn't in your world there would be more preyed upon because the church hold onto their life entirely?
I'll also engage in that in my later substantives. I'll flag it. OO frames poverty as the government's inability to fix systemic problems, but this makes the obligation much more important. Historically, I've already said this many times, churches marginalize the poor, abuse orphan teenagers sexually, cause irreversible trauma. This means that the church has caused a lot of harm that they clearly need to pay back to the people that they owe it to. This means that it is wrong for all or any opposition bands to argue that these rural areas need help. If they truly do need help, they can use NGOs and the government policies that they depend so much on. If these policies did not ask for your help, don't give it. Otherwise, it's proselytization, which we already explained is very predatory. Secondly, on the principle of duty, OO argues that the Catholic Church is not a platform for fulfilling the materialistic needs. This is so predatory in so many ways. First of all, these are poor people that we are talking about. It's abhorrent for OO to argue that it's selfish for these poor people to try and deny themselves of the basic needs. The principle of the church of being an agent to limit worldly endeavors only apply to greed and avarice. A principle like the church has clearly abandoned a long time ago, considering their billions in net worth. The Catholic Church is hypocritical. The very least they can do is repay the damage they have done by giving scholarships, education towards those who are in need, which is our motto, by the way, because we are supposed to prioritize allocating funds to support the livelihood of its underprivileged members. This means that the church is directly responsible for financially or other ways like sponsoring the underprivileged members, whether it's through their education or like buying their basic everyday needs. Okay, OO might tell you that it is very predatory for us to give money back to the underprivileged things, but this is a timeline issue. Okay, it is not the fact that the church uses this as a marketing as a way to market the religion, but it is already that the harm is already been done. These people are still in your church. The people who are affected are still in your church. These people still exist. This is the people who you owe it to. And then also there's a dependence kind of special relationship happening, because I've already explained to you that the church has a very special dynamic in which the followers depend on the church. You know, and the reason why the churches aren't even taxed in the first place is because the government depends on them to give them the irreplaceable services. This is why, yeah. And even then, I would argue that it would be even much more predatory for the OO to want to build, or opposition bands to build churches in the name of connecting them, because that is far more predatory if you think about it. Which leads to my third model, or on my third point on the model. What exactly is the supporting livelihood? I already told you. Exactly because there is politicization. Exactly when politicians already use the narrative for religion to further the political agendas, it's far more predatory for the opposition bands to build even more churches to further solidify their agenda even further. You give the enemy more ammunition for them. That is not a predatory conversion on the outside of the house. This is a timeline issue, as I've already told you. Again, opposition model is unnecessary because in rural areas the churches would already exist anyway. Because the Catholic churches are very wide, they have a lot of expansionary value. But even then, if you really need to like help to maintain it, it is not like we are devoting 100%. Even 10% of the leftovers from what we built onto the our model, the 10% leftovers should be enough because of, again, billions, and this is not very little. So either way, on both sides of the house, we are the ones who actually uphold the values of the Catholic Church. This is your only chance to salvage whatever dignity you have left.
Thank you, member of call for that speech. Next, we'll have the member of opposition. Here.
Hi, before I start, is my audio and am I audible?
Loud and clear.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so if you guys would like to POI, please unmute yourself because I'm not gonna see the chat. Several responses to both OG and CG. First question, is it within the capacity of the Catholic Church to help people out of poverty? Because we believe that the Catholic Church should provide access and guidance, but it's too big of a burden to impose, in which the Catholic Church should focus on repairing existing churches and building new churches in rural areas rather than giving direct funds to these underprivileged members. Understand that I think OO clearly cleaned the case of OG, explaining about it's not about which team can provide which funds that we can help. I think both government and opposition agree that we are trying to help underprivileged communities, but understand that the problem lies on how we can engage with those members in hopes of fulfilling the Catholic Church's obligation, right? Our winning premise on moral obligation will answer all OG's and CG's concerns. But I want to talk about the interests of the Catholic Church other than spreading gospel, right? The first is actually to create a safe communal space for the public. Let's go back in history. The reason why a church was built, the reason why Jesus stepped and wanted to spread gospel was through a physical building, and it's often used for gatherings, a place of refuge for all people, whether they're a part of the church or not. Understand that there are people who are Catholic in rural areas, and they can be considered as underprivileged as well. And the fact that there is the lack of access in public space and community is what is struggling and a big burden for them. A physical structure of a church will actually be used as a symbol for gathering, and we want to improve that contact person-to-person engagement, and that is actually going to fulfill the burden as the prerequisite of spiritual fulfillment coming from OO, right? We will fill in also as the process how a physical structure can actually trigger that engagement between the Catholic Church and society as to evoke intangible benefits when it comes to being curious about the religion, wanting to learn, eventually giving back to that specific church, right? Because understand, in government side, you did not explain what is the likelihood, how do you prove a person receiving direct funds and then having that feeling of caring and wanting to help and give back to that specific church. If a person is given funds, they will tend to only receive those funds and only to fulfill their needs and wants. You did all OG and CG's teams did not prove the likelihood. How are they going to give back to the community when that's what you want for the longevity of the religion, right? So first, two layers of explanation talking about the role of the Catholic Church. Understand that it should not only limit to Catholics, because we believe that OO only focus on what is the interest of Catholics. Understand that as a church, as a religious institution, you should not limit yourself, knowing that there is a possibility of potential members of society becoming a Catholic, right? But that's not our end goal. Again, going back to our history, our roots is the fact that we just want to create a safe space and a gathering for people, which is why this is linking back to the point of why we want to create events, why there are monasteries, why we want to create education in church and institutions, why it's giving a free space for all if you want to hold events, right? It's not to focus on we want to cater only to Catholics, or why we only want to force other people to be Catholic. But the very first is to give contribution, to give help without the need or the forcefulness of them giving back to you. But we're still going to prove why it's going to happen in our side, knowing that there are limitations when it comes to funds, right? Understand that in our side, because the long-term goal of religion is longevity, and the way to fulfill this is to physical contact, person-to-person engagement. When you create engagements like events and monasteries, when you give a free space for other people to utilize, even if there are regulations, it's still going to be better in our side, the fact that that's going to evoke that feeling of a sense of belonging, a feeling of being helped. Understand that yes, we concede we will not prioritize on giving direct funds to them, but at the very least, it's going to be better in our side, because we believe that the allocation of funds is not going to be a big burden of this church, right? But before that, yes, POI from OG.
If in-person contact is the only interest, why is it more important to expand other than prioritizing your already existing member who already devoted themselves for so long? Safe space is better on OG.
Okay, understand that it's not enough just to focus on existing members, right? You are clearly reading this motion as that this house prefers where another is sacrificed by the other one. We believe that the prioritization does not diminish the fact that we are also helping the existing members, but the problem is you have to focus in rural areas, right? That is the that is the key vulnerable actors in this motion, the fact that they have the lack of accessibility. How can you help them by focusing on allocating funds when you cannot even prove that there's a high chances that they are going to help other people as well? They are going to help the churches that have helped them. You cannot prove that because we believe that as humans, when you are given the funds, when you are being helped, you only focus on your own circle. You believe that like, oh, this is what God has given to me. I have to expend all of the benefits that I have. I have to maximize all of my benefits, but they tend to forget about helping other people. The problem is, as a religious institution, that is your goal, to remind other people that we are giving this help for free, that we are giving this help for all, and we are allowing you guys to build and maintain the churches, right? That is why we want the prioritization, because the process of building and maintaining existing churches will not be expensive, just like what you are posing as a concern, right? The church doesn't have to be made of gold and velvet like in Vatican, but at the very least a big room for communion and gathering, right? The harm in government side will be much more worse, because when you decrease the prioritization of physical structure of church, you will deplete your funds to give direct funds to other people, but you cannot guarantee if those members of society, members of a Catholic Church, is going to give back to other people who are underprivileged, knowing that you have limitations. And second of all, you did not give a guarantee that people are going to build that church again, right? Understand that in our side, the person-to-person contact with through gatherings, whether that it's for Catholics, but also for general, we believe that that is going to push the evokeness of feeling that wanting to be curious about the religion and eventually wanting to be a part of it. We do not force them to be Catholic, but the fact that they are willing to give contributions to help the society around them, that is a part of the role of the church, the Catholic Church, right? Understand that we have fulfilled our burden and we already answered all of the concerns coming from OG as well as CG. We are proud to oppose. Thank you.
Thank you, MO, for that speech. Next, we'll have the government whip. You're here.
Oh God, I forgot my camera's dead. Sorry. Okay. For PI preference, please just just unmute. Wait, I'm just gonna type it. POI unmute, and then pronounce she her. Wait, I'm so sorry. I'm really nervous right now. Hold on. Let me set my timer first. Oh wait. I think let me get rid of this Bible first. Okay. Okay, I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Matthew 18:20. For when 2 or 3 gather in my name, there I am with them. This is the word that God said to all of us. I think by this verse alone, the goal of the Catholic Church is to commune together and help each other. Members are the very core of the church, and without them, the church is just a building. God told us that the church is not the building, but it's the people who within it, who help each other, who commune with each other, and also talk about God and help each other at the end of the day. So then there is one point of matrix that I think should be fulfilled to win this debate. Who can prove that their side fulfill the principle of duty by the Catholic Church? The principle of the duty that the church is pushing is that they will help people regardless of their identity. They will help people because of God has helped them first and etc. Right? That is the principle of the duty that the church should fulfill. So I think there will be one point of clash in this debate: the principle of duty. Let's compare between all benches then. Let's comparison with closing opposition. I think closing opposition try to tell you that it's too burdensome for the church to help people through fundings and etc. However, we have to realize that the Catholic Church is rich. They don't only receive donations from like the people only, but they receive donations from companies, from countries, for example. They also receive they also have company shares and etc. Right? At the end of the day, they will still have a really big income. They still have a really big money. So then why don't you use this income from the Catholic Church to that's the reason why they are still able to sustain this really big network of a church. and that is why they still able to donate to humanitarian issues and etc. at the end of the day, right? CO also questions the likelihood of under our side of the house on why the marginalized community will suddenly give back. I think the marginalized community the community that the church helps are already members of the church. They came to the church because they feel like they need God, and they are comfortable with the teaching of the church, and they feel a sense of peace and a sense of belonging within the church. They did not expect the church to help them. Why? Because they still give donations anyways. They still serve the church, even though they didn't receive really any help in the first place at the end of the day, right? So then that is why I think that when you help them, they're still gonna give back to the church, and even they're gonna give back more, especially when they know they've received help. These people are very they're very kind. These people are those people who feel like they have to give back for something that they have received at the end of the day. This is why I think they will give back to the church for these helps at the end of the day. And also they question why these helps are important. Exactly that. These helps are important because there are so many issues that happen within society, and that the government cannot solve this. The government cannot solve this, right? The opposition try to frame it to you that it's the government's mistake because of they cannot solve systemic issues and etc. And okay, this is why the church comes in and helps solve these issues, right? These helps are really important for the livelihood of the community, and also for their well-being and etc. Right? It's good to be to have more education, because at the end of the day, it's gonna help them break the cycle of poverty, break the cycle of marginalization and etc. That's gonna happen under opposition side of the house. Okay, let's compare with OO then. I think opening opposition try to frame that the underprivileged community can still be loyal to God despite their poverty, and they should not be drawn to money, and that they I think OO also really brought a very mean framing, saying that these poor people just should just hold in their needs and just serve God as if they don't need to fulfill their needs every day. The underprivileged community is never drawn to money and may not express the need for money, but they still pray to God that they will be able to have an easier life later. But just because they don't look like they need money or say it does not mean that you should not help them, right? If you know that they actually need help, but then they don't actively express it, it's still good for you to help them. They're still gonna feel appreciated. Even they're gonna feel more appreciated when you help them, even though they didn't even ask for it, right? Or also try to tell you that donation for the poor people shifts the beliefs of people to become much more materialistic and etc. The underprivileged community will suddenly become materialistic under our side of the house, but instead receiving help strengthens their belief more, since they believe that God is willing to help them to the church and to pay back for the material help, the material help that they will everything help well, is willing to help them with the church, and to bring the material help that they will be more incentivized to help the church and attend, plus tell others about the church kindness, right? And hence why we think it's better to serve the people, because directly you're serving them on a personal level, you're directly serving their needs and etc. And that's why the people will spread the message to others, hence why the church will gain more exposure to others, right? The church is also rich enough, and they won't force donations of the people, since it is against their belief to force people or extort money out of their people anyways, right? But then also frame the church as predatory and promising financial benefits through joining. This is very uncharitable, since true churches are never predatory and aim to help the people, right? Sure, there are churches who pry your bank account and drain it for quote unquote the greater good, but I think people already know enough to avoid these churches, right? The Catholic Church promised to never pry people out of their money, and you probably barely hear of a single case of a church prying their people, a Catholic church prying people out of their money, unless the church was already wrong to begin with, right? So then, okay, fourth point then, OO try to tell you that donations to help the community already exist, and it's already enough, and it's the government's responsibility to help the poor. Later, people, and they framed it as the government's inability to solve structural issues, which is exactly why churches exist, to fill in the gap that the government cannot do. Support the people on a personal level. The feeling of the people when they are catered to on a personal level, where the fundings they receive are full and real and not corrupted, make people feel more appreciated. And their opposition side, okay, sure, they will receive donations. However, the donation isn't not that much to begin with, right? They're more focused on building churches, and then people will question, hey, you have money to build church, but you don't really have that much money to help us at the end of the day, right? What is your actual goal under opposition side of the house? Their actual goal is just expansion, colonialism, and etc. They're trying to build buildings here and there, so they think they're gonna try to preach the message and etc. However, you preach the message, it's actually better for you to help these people at the end of the day, because that is what God wants anyways, not for you to build so many buildings and etc. So then let's compare between OG then. It's better to help people in the longer run, since building churches it just shows that you don't really care about the suffering of the people, right? So then, okay, let me tell you why OG why we're better than OG. Okay, I think in OG they played with the idea of helping poor people. However, what makes our side better is that the church in our bench helps not only poor people but the marginalized community too. This is important as the church promised to help everyone regardless of their identity. Aralyn or Firefly already told you that the Catholic Church already contributed to marginalization of minorities in the past, and helping most vulnerable members is a way for them to forgive. Right? Humanitarian issues are also much more important than building churches. People are being violated almost every day due to humanitarian issues that goes on within society. Victims of these humanitarian issues are women, gender and sexuality minorities, racial minorities, and etc. I think the church wants to solve these humanitarian issues anyways because they want to create a world of peace, right? They want to be salt to the earth. They want to make everyone's life better, right? And also these marginalized communities such as the feminist anti-discrimination movement and the LGBTQ plus community are the people who struggle a lot with fundings and support. They're trying to solve humanitarian issues that exist within society. Helping them is much more important. Those is at the end, you are serving the people. You're not only serving the church. You're not trying to aim for building the church and etc. Propose. Sorry.
Thank you, Gokul, for that speech. Next will be opposition whip. Here.
Wait, yeah, give me a second to adjust. Sure. Oh yeah. So POIs via chat please. But if there's any signal issues, karena tadi maaf banget sempat drop juga, langsung unmute and cut us off aja. Terima kasih. Ya lagunya jadi gede. Okay. Disclaimer, I'm a Christian, not a Catholic, so sorry kalau ada yang sedikit misrepresentation. Also, shout out to Atma. Starting my speech in a few seconds. When the Apostle Peter was asked by God, is it okay for you to pick between Romans, Latins, and Jews? The answer is no. You're supposed to love everyone. When in Matthew's, the last 3 verses are the command to actually go, make every people mine, teach them in my ways, convert them if you can, but also spread the love of God. That also means the principles that go both government benches are trying to justify and prioritize in the debate should not be limited to only certain people, but they shouldn't also be limited only to the most urgent and dire to the point of ignoring everyone else. We say going general fits better both with the holy mandates literally in the Bible, but also towards the motion, because as much as this is centric towards the Catholic Church, towards Vatican City even, it's still this house believes that, which means we are free to see the propriety of the role and also interpret it in the debate, right? That's why Siska's point about engagement, Cherry's point about engagement is so important and unfortunately ignored, because it's a prerequisite for people to feel a sense of trust and communion, like what the opening debate wanted to portray. It's also a prerequisite in order for people to build this rapport, in order for them to feel like they belong, and also to give back, like what CO tries to say. We're not saying all of these interests are not important, but we have the prerequisites, so we should take this debate by that virtue alone. But I have a few things, everything's going to be intertwined. I'm going to bring why building a following, why gaining trust, and everything else needs to be in engagement. So let's take a look, right? When we actually choose all of these things, my first speaker has already talked about what kind of programs will be there. OO has already established examples, but we were the ones who actually explained the process, right? What does this look like? I'm going to give a few examples. For example, if you want to have programs that are within the Catholic Church, you need a monastery. Why? Because they're the ones who are going to train you to build crafts, to build art, to know how to sell it, to manage it, and also take care of the finances insofar as you need their assistance, right? This goes to show that the education progress and also program needs you to be in constant contact with them, which means putting people physically there so you can learn from them. This is also the same reasoning why so many people already leave the Catholic religion, but still feel a sense of indebtedness towards the church, because they see the programs are really that good, even if they don't trust the management that goes behind the scenes, right? They know that it has done a lot of good. Think, for example, towards the cross subsidy system that we see in a lot of Catholic churches, Canisius and also Santa Ursula in Jakarta, for example, right? This means that we can still fulfill all of the burden all the other three teams want, but also go general, and we can fulfill it only when we have a physical building to maximize everything. That's why building and maintaining is the most important part, and this needs to be done through engagement. When you want to, for example, have a program such as orphanages visits that are actually managed by the monastery, and also have, for example, kitchen soups that are run by the monastery and also be there for the houseless, right? They are the ones who go into contact per week, per day even, and actually come into contact, humanize all of these people who are in the Catholic Church and learn to trust us, so they can see that, oh, the Catholic values are like this. This is why I feel like even whether or not I believe in the religion is secondary, but I want to be like them. I want to emulate the values of Christ that they think is good, because I see the good that it does. And in doing so, we both give a pragmatic reasoning, and also we get the value of disseminating the word of God, right? So we say that we can co-opt the benefits in that are a common interest better on our side of the house. Compare this with direct help only, right? Because here's the thing, we don't know whether or not giving direct help like money, cash flow, or certain programs that are co-managed with other people necessitates better integrity, better management, or yield better results. And we think that if you want to impose the degree of financial management toward people who are exactly underrepresented, it's going to be a very unfair burden from the government benches as well. So that's why we don't want to give this burden to them. But if giving back is a demand, it's also bad, because this means that the level of genuinity that both government benches want to prioritize is not going to be there anymore. Because the moment you feel like, hey, when I give back, they still send me Christmas cards and invite me for Easter, for example. But when I stop going there, they're suddenly not inviting me anymore. That's going to be much more of a disappointment compared to the initial expectation of, I need to go there and be involved in the activities, and then you learn organic trust, and then you opt in, right? So the degree of trust and genuinity is going to be better on our side of the house. We're saying that this is not the main point when it comes to trust, but it is for engagement purposes only. Before I continue, POIOG.
Values wouldn't matter when people don't feel like they're catered to. Even if we have cross subsidies in the future, what happens towards the people now? Because external parties is not the alternative.
If you are a practicing Catholic member, we think that number one, already mentioned the narrative of sacrifice, but also if you really want to be a good Catholic, you shouldn't be conditional. So we don't see why that is justified on your side of the house, but also there's a lot of counter narratives, such as you have to balance out your specific duty to also help engage in church activities and also spread the word of God. So we say, all in all, there will be dissatisfaction, sure, but not to the point you suddenly leave the Catholic Church, right? We say this is an unfair characterization imposed on us. But even if, let's say, you want community, and community needs to be catered to physically, right? That's going to be better on our side of the house. Number one, existing members have a better chance of meeting, engaging. Number two, they actually have potential members. And here's the difference. You might be buddies because you're neighbors, but you don't have things like a confessional booth where every single week you can actually talk to a pastor and feel like, hey, I did something bad. I don't feel like I'm worthy of God's love anymore, and be given comfort. They even have secular counseling. If you're not a practicing Catholic member, you can still come to church. The door is open wide, literally like mushola that we have throughout Indonesia, right? But also, here's why we're different, right? Because exactly of these secular purposes, it means that there is less differentiation. So the sense of belonging overall is going to be included, right? The sense of belonging that CO is talking about, in the best case, even when there is trade-off, is actually a feeling of exclusivity and superiority. We don't think that's actually good to begin with. So we say, in the terms of moral values, we take the cake, right? Why are we supposed to win here? Number one, my first speaker is engaged. Why has already explained why engagement is the most important thing. Number two, let's differentiate us with OO, right? Number one, OO's claim stops at examples. At best case, CO expands the process, and also why it's actually easily implemented and easily accessible. Number two, we say that in CO there is a larger scope and process analysis, why the interest is still there, and it actually encompasses everyone, so we should win on better engagement. Very proud to oppose.
Right. Thank you all for the speech.